podcast host of three podcasts, especially the digital dating. No other than Mr. Anonymous Andrew.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Andrew. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. That's why I'm here to talk about myself, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So just to go, I go by the name of Anonymous Andrew, and that's a whole story into itself. But briefly, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I live with bipolar disorder, and I was born and raised in New York, and I'm still here. And I have had I would say I was born in the term is born with the silver spoon in my mouth, meaning I came from a wealthy background, and I flaundered that. I ruined that by drinking and drugging and going off in a different direction. So I have three younger sisters, and they all did well, but I was the firstborn, so my parents got it right after me. So they raised me, and I'm not blaming my parents, but I just was a rebel, and I had no cause, a rebel without a cause. And I went through life thinking that I was self-centered. I might even put myself on the narcissistic spectrum. And after about, I don't know, let's say I got married at 25. I had several children. Then I got divorced, and then I got married again, and then I had another child. And all that time, I was only concerned about myself. And that is not a way to go through life. So I did try to get into sobriety in my 30s. And I did get sober for a couple of years, but it did not stick. And so I ended up drinking and drugging again for another 18 years, I think it was, until about 2015. And in 2015, I took it seriously this time. My life had just been, I woke up one day, I was 55 years old, and I said, I can't live like this anymore. I just can't. And so I took it seriously, and I got some help, and I changed my life. I kind of did two changes in my life, one in 2015 and then one about 3 years ago. And we'll talk about that with the book. So, so I have about 10 years of sobriety. As a matter of fact, I celebrate 10 years in about 2 months in July. And that's where I'm at. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I did mention that I live with bipolar disorder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for inspiring us, Mr. Anonymous Andrew. And today, what book that you want to recommend us?
Okay. Yeah, the book. Let's just say first that I don't read books a lot because I don't have the attention span to read. However, because I'm a podcaster and I was also a DJ in college, I'm very much into audio, and so I listen to books. The book that I listened to was The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And that was published in 2007. And yep, there it is. And what a fantastic book. I just wish I had read that book 20, 30 years prior, although it wasn't written yet, so I couldn't have done that.
So, what is your impression of The Untethered Soul when you started reading it?
Well, it's a book unlike any other book that I've ever read or listened to. We all have, and Freud talked about this. We all have three parts of our psychology, our mind. It's the id, the ego, and the superego. And Michael talks about that a little bit in the book. And it's about that voice that's in our head the one that when you're driving a car, you think, oh, I forgot to call somebody today. Maybe I'll call them later. Or it's that voice that you see on somebody on the side of the road, or maybe somebody cuts you off and you say some swear words in your head or something. There's a voice in all of our heads. And this book teaches us how to dismiss that voice, or not necessarily dismiss it, but listen to it, but we don't have to, we can hear it, but not have to listen to it. For example, so my podcast, which is about dating, was born because I was a serial codependent person. So I was I could not be in a relationship. I was always in a relationship with a woman. If it was so, my marriage lasted 7 years. The next marriage lasted, I don't know, 5 years. And every relationship after that was just a year, 2 years, 18 months. And that's why I said a couple of years ago, it changed. And I picked up this book and I read it, and after a very, very serious breakup I was in a relationship with somebody, and she really did a number on me. And now, keep in mind, now I'm sober at this point. I had been 7 years sober, and The Untethered Soul, I had to read this book because this woman, when she left the relationship, we both kind of left together, but I didn't want it to end. She said some not nice things to me. She told me that I wasn't good looking, and she put some negative thoughts into my head, and that put me into a downward spiral. And I started to believe that I was not worthy of love, that I was not a good looking man, or even a good person for that matter. And for about 3 months, give or take, I was in a very serious depression, and I almost to the point I didn't want to live anymore. But thankfully to my alcoholic support group, I was able, because I also was very close to drinking again. When I read this book, it taught me so many things. And by the way, he's got 2 follow-up books. So Michael, he wrote this book, The Untethered Soul. Then he wrote the Surrender Experiment, which he went out and practiced this book. So he went and lived in the woods for, I think it was a year, with nothing, just by himself. And then and that was published in 2015. And then he did the Living Untethered in 2022. I read all 3 books, and they're just phenomenal. He basically teaches what he taught me was to witness the thoughts. And even if somebody, whether it's our own thoughts or something somebody says to us, we don't have to hold them. We can let them go. And he even says in the book that it sounds much simpler than it is. In other words, well, if somebody does something to you and you're angry, you're frustrated, you tend to lash out. What he teaches you to do is take a step back, and for many reasons, don't react. And I know I'm making this sound very simple, but if you read the book and then read it again, because I read it 3 times, it will sink in on how easy it is to step back from any situation or any thoughts that you're having in your head. We'll talk about the negative thoughts. So so when this woman left me and she told me that I was not worthy of love, that I'm not a good person, and I for months until I read this book, I thought that, until of course I felt that I was a nobody, that I didn't belong on this earth, that I was a useless human being. And after reading this book, and I wish I did what he did when he lived in the woods. He went out and built a cabin, and he lived in the woods, and he reflected on his life. And that's what I've done in the past couple of years. I stopped dating. I should not, maybe I should rephrase that. I dated, but I didn't get into relationships because the relationships were the problem. And I was the common denominator. I was getting into these relationships and attracting the wrong woman time after time after time. So, like the drinking, I stopped. I had to stop. I had to take make a change in my life. So I took a couple of years off from getting into relationships. And that's when I decided to start the podcast. I wanted to tell my story. Now, Michael Singer and many authors on your show, they write books, and that's a great way to tell your story. I found it easier to come on and speak my story. So the podcast starts off in season 1 about my story, about what happened to me in this relationship and how did my alcoholism and my codependency and my id, my the part of me that was a narcissist was holding me back from enjoying life. So after reading Michael's book, and not dating and not relating, being in relationships, I learned to live in my own skin, which is something that I was unable to do for 40 or 50 years of my life. I turn 65 next month. And so take away the infancy years and the up until 10, 15. So let's just say almost 50 years of my life I wasted, I think. But I'm not regretting that, and that's behind me now. I woke up with a new retrospective on life after reading this book, and I've had the best time and the most fulfilling life in the past 2 to 3 years by staying single and not listening to those. So what Michael does with these thoughts in your head is to listen, you make it as if your thoughts are another entity. So you go into another room and you keep the thoughts in this room, and the room has a window. And what you do is you look through the window and you see the thoughts. So I'm not a good person. I am not worthy of love. So I go into this room and I look over there and I see the thoughts, and maybe they're writing on the wall, whatever. And all I have to do is just acknowledge that they're there and then walk away. And I never have to think about those thoughts again. And again, it may sound simplistic, like it can't be that simple. It can be that simple because I have been practicing it, and Michael proved it in his next book. And it's just a matter of willingness. Do you want to walk around all day thinking of negative thoughts? Just what he taught me was recognize that they're there, but let them pass. Think of thoughts like the wind. So like you're outside and a breeze comes across you. That's a thought. So let it come across and then let it keep going, and it goes away. So maybe the leaf that's in the wind blows, and that thought, just let it go. Let it go. And it's gone. And so I no longer think I'm not worthy of love. I no longer think I'm not handsome. I no longer think that I'm a terrible person. I'm a good person. And when I put the alcohol down, I became a better person. And today I'm trying to tell my story to the world, whoever wants to listen, of course. I don't see myself as an influencer. I'm just your average guy who grew up in New York, who got involved with alcohol and drugs. And I came from a happy, very warm, loving family. But I chose at that time not to be involved with that family. And today my parents have passed on, but I speak to my parents as much as I can through my prayers and my meditation, which is another thing. So Michael taught us about meditation. how you can, especially if you do it at night like I do, reflect on my day and reflect on my thoughts. And I can also talk to people that are no longer in this dimension. So I believe in the afterlife, and so I talk to my parents.
Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your podcast to the world that inspire people for sure. So, how easy or difficult was it for you to grasp the concept of letting go?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight. So that's why I said I read it. I had to read the book a couple of times. The first time I read it, I said, I like this concept, but I don't know that I can do this. And many people have that same thought. So, fortunately for me, because I'm a podcaster, like I said earlier, I listen to it. So I have that book on my phone. So all I have to do is when I'm driving or doing house chores or whatever, I put my earbuds in and I can listen to the book. And that's how I listen to it again and again. And the gentleman who reads the book, Michael doesn't read it. If you put the book back up, it tells you who read it, who narrated, I should say. His voice is extremely calming, and when a book is in an audible book is read, I think it's very important as to who narrates it, because the voice that you're listening to helps you understand what's being said to you. And it took me 2 or 3 times, but you can let these thoughts go. They, I'm a living proof. If you had talked to me 3 years ago, you would have had a different Andrew in front of you. I would not have been as upbeat and as happy. And you know what? I don't have anything different in my life. I have the same house. I have the same materialistic things in my life, the same job. The only thing I don't have are my negative thoughts that this woman put in my head, and that many people put in my head, and that my own brain, my own id, the id that Freud talked about, I don't have to listen to those thoughts anymore.
So, Mr. Andrew, Singer talks about observing your thoughts instead of becoming them. How was the practice work for you?
For me, it is easy to do it through meditation. Uh, so, and meditation is done in many forms. And of course, today meditation, like yoga and pickleball, it's all the rage. Everybody's talking about meditation. You have to find the meditation that works for you. And I have an app on my phone. I'm not going to mention it because it's a well-known app, but I have an app on my phone that is what they call a guided meditation, and I love it. I use it day and night, and in the morning I listen to it. Sometimes on the way to work, but at nighttime, what I do is I put it on one of my speakers, like my Alexa speaker, and it helps me go to sleep. But I also set it for 20 minutes, and it's a 20-minute guided meditation. And during that meditation, I listened. I look at my thoughts, and I use that example of a room that I told you about, where I'm in another room, and I look to the window and I see my thoughts. And if I don't like what I see, or they're just not nice thoughts, I wave goodbye, and I literally, and by hopefully at that time my eyes will slowly shut, and I'm going into I forget what it's called, but there's a moment right before you go to sleep. And I also used to have to take medication to go to sleep because I was too anxious, I was too nervous, I had insomnia. Now I sleep like a I don't like this term, sleep like a baby, because babies don't really sleep. If you're a father or a parent, babies don't sleep. So sleeping like a baby is kind of an oxymoron. But that's I see my thoughts through meditation.
Okay, awesome. Good job, Mr. Andrew. Good job. So, what are your struggles in creating your podcast?
Oh, that's a good question. So after taking about 2 years off from, I have to be specific here. When I say that I take 2 years off from dating, I really mean getting into relationships. I did go on dates. I've been on many dates, but my story really started when I would go on one date and I would go after that woman. It's called sniper dating, meaning that you find one person and you stick to them, and you no matter what, I want that person. And somebody, a support therapist, and through other means, told me, no, 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 date as many people as you can, because especially me, my codependency, I would just latch on to the first woman that came along, and that's just not healthy. So the podcast is about getting back out into the dating world. What what used to be easy for me many years ago, I would be able to get dates, not a problem. Whether I was out, I don't know, at a party, at a nightclub, wherever. I Getting women was never a problem for me. It was keeping them. Today, I don't drink, so I don't go to bars. I don't go to parties. Today, my life is pretty much centered on my grandchildren. I have two beautiful grandchildren. I have three adult boys, and I'm very much involved in their lives today because I really wasn't back then. So the podcast today is about learning how to get back out into the dating scene, especially if you've been away from it for a while. And the dating scene in today's world has changed. It is so different. So we're post COVID, so dating has changed since the COVID pandemic. Dating has changed since the Me Too movement. There has been many events that have happened in the past 5-10 years that have changed the way people go on dates and people talk to each other and respect each other. And I'm finding it difficult. It's difficult to find somebody to talk to and then make to give you an example. Let's say in the past year I've gone on maybe 12 dates. Only one of them went to the second date. Only one. So why? What you know? This is why we date. You go on. You can't really learn that much about somebody on a first date. You go out, you meet, you have coffee, or I don't drink, so I go on coffee dates. So you're supposed to see if there's chemistry, and then you say, "Hey, let's go on a second date, and maybe we'll go to dinner, maybe we'll take a walk," and then you get to unpeel the layers and get. But women don't seem to want to do that. So I don't know.
Mhm.
But that's what the podcast is about: is diving into the what's happening in modern romance, modern culture, and it's quite interesting what's going on. And of course, if you want to learn more, tune into my podcast, and I take a very deep, I do like a research as to why this is happening.
Yes, people support Mr. Andrew, the digital dating. So, what would be your short term and long term goals in podcasting?
Well, after I started the digital dating, which it has changed names, it used to be just the Anonymous Andrew Dating Podcast, and then it went to Modern Dating. And as a podcaster yourself, you probably know in the beginning you don't know what you're doing, you don't know, you learn, and you don't know how to market. And I've been working with some professionals lately, and we decided to rebrand the podcast, and it's now the Digital Dating Podcast. But along the way, I found myself interested in something else, and uh, this is a pandemic that's going on. Different. I'm not talking about COVID. There's the cult world, cult, CULT, the cults, like the religious cults, like David Koresh from Texas and Waco. and the Mormon Church and the Luz del Mundo from Mexico, and I could name so many. I started a cult podcast called Cultimatum, and I have a co-host who is a ex-cult survivor. She's from the House of Yahweh, and she got out of there. The cults are like organized crime. They're really bad. There's a lot of sexual abuse and polygamy and pedophilia, and it's just a very bad scene. Anyway, I got into investigating cults, and I found that to be fascinating. So my second podcast is about cults, and then I started a third podcast. So to answer your question, what is my goal is to retire soon and just podcast about dating, cults, and the third podcast is about current events and topics. My opinion on what's going on in the world, and then I will bring on guests and we'll talk about it. Pretty much that one just launched, and I'm not focused on that right now. Right now, the digital dating podcast and the Cultimatum podcast are my two podcasts that I spent all my time. Like today, before our interview, I haven't moved from this chair since 7 o'clock this morning. So anyway, I'm sure you know what it's like to put together a podcast.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Andrew, and looking for more success.
Thank you.
All your podcasts that you are creating, and we salute you for doing all this podcast. It will empower the people all over the world. So if you could ask Michael Singer one question about the book itself, what would it be?
I would probably ask him what inspired him to write it. Because when people write books, there's an inspiration. So I'd like to know what inspired him to write the first book, The Untethered Soul.
Certainly. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Andrew, I want to plug in all my audiobooks on Audible. Please do grab a copy, or please do support my audiobooks. Book 101 review, of course, all 3 volume. Volume 3 is suggestions. Volume 2 is selected, and volume 1 is highly recommended. These are my first season of Book 101 review. And of course, my Earth Fever, my climate change, unraveling climate, our race to restore balance, and stand tall, stand together, breaking the chains of bullying. And of course, life is too short, a journey of discovery, fulfillment, and joy. Please do grab them, available on Audible and one of the best sellers. So, Mr. Andrew, to sum up our discussion for today, after finishing the book, what is one daily habit or mindset shift you are committed to practicing?
Being kind to myself. You might think being kind to others would be something you might expect my answer to be, but many of us beat ourselves up on a daily basis. Oh, I should have done that better. I did that. Is being kind to myself. And we have 1 minute left, so I will tell you quickly. There was a day when I would brush my teeth in the bathroom. I could not look at the mirror. I would have to open the mirror because I didn't like what I saw. Today, I can brush my teeth looking in the mirror because I'm happy with what I see.
Mr. Anonymous Andrew, thank you so much for inspiring us. Please continue doing it because people need it. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your podcasts itself?
Come to the Digital Dating with Anonymous Andrew, available on Apple, Spotify, and every platform that does podcasting.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Anonymous Andrew, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering podcasts to come. So, Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.